Okay, boy and girl. Books you have never seen before. This is called the Gospel Parallels. And what this person has done is to put the three synoptic Gospels down parallel, like when you're taking a story of Jesus and you go, now I've heard that somewhere else, then you've got it. So like here is Matthew's version is longer than Luke's and Matthew and so forth. So anything gospel parallels, good for New Testament studies. Okay, next, good. Now, we're right on the, well, first of all, did you notice that I said everything that we do in a sermon will be what you've read, and sometimes it was Friday before we got to that story, and then this time it was Monday for the following week, so you had a long time to look at that. Did you have what were you thinking when you got through looking at the story of Lazarus? You've had 6 days to think about this, folks. Daryl, your lips are moving, but that means words are forming.
Starting off, it sounded cruel.
Yeah.
But then you figured out why he did it. It just took a while.
Still, I mean, if you think about it, if someone said, well, I knew that I could have been there, but I chose not to, because I knew it'd turn out, so then I'll show up. I mean, that's really kind of common. I mean, it should not be unexpected of Jesus in John, because everything's that way. Why is this man, why is he blind? Was it his sins or sins? No, he was put here for a reason. See? There is that in John where we think and where we get our idea that everything is predetermined, fixed. It really doesn't matter what you do. God's got a plan and you can do anything you want to, but that's what's going to be followed. Which makes you wonder then, so you don't really have free will, do you? You don't really have choice. It really doesn't matter. God's already decided it's not your time, too bad. In which case, always cross when the railroad crossing signs are down and find out if it's your time yet. I mean, I'm very serious about that. There's a reason. John is doing something here that I'm not sure John believes in generally. That when Jesus is involved, there is a plan, and Jesus is going to make sure that that plan is followed through. He will not let them grab him on a certain day, because that's not the way the plan, is working. But it comes over to us as if this was, God and I worked that all out before I came down. I took the night owl down. And so it's all matter. And it doesn't matter what you people do or don't do, because it's all fixed and it's wired. Okay. So, and there is a good solution to that quandary. Think about it. I mean, there's, okay. All right.
On that.
Yes.
It's a dumb question. When Jesus was in the temple and I don't even remember where it was at, but it said he hid himself.
Yeah.
So that they couldn't grab him,
Yeah.
couldn't stone him.
Yeah.
My question is, did he divinely?
Yeah. He pulled the coat of invisibility over him, and like in the movies. Yeah.
Is that what he did, or did he just go into the crowd and they couldn't?
I have an answer for this.
You don't know?
Yes. Well, again, it's the same thing. He's doing what he thinks has to be done, and it's producing the reaction that he knows it's going to produce, but we're not there yet, folks. So, yeah, Yeah, but you've also introduced the next topic, and that is that this whole journey to Jerusalem for Easter is completely different than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Completely different. Why don't the other three Gospels have this story? I mean, you want a powerful story, folks. Good grief. And I have to admit, see, when I read this, I discovered something that had never registered before. This is because I'm a slow learner. But it's also that you can not be paying attention to what you think you're reading. I didn't realize Lazarus went with Jesus and the Jews were plotting to kill both of them. Well, yeah, if we're not going to accept that it was God's actions that produced this dead man who's walking around with us, then we better kill him too. Talk about witnesses. Here, put them up side by side. Here is, this is what I've done. So.
I like also, just a little aside from, that, is Martha. You said in your sermon,
Yeah.
It seems accusatory. I think it was accusatory. I think Martha went out there with guns blazing. I think she was mad, and I think she went out there and accused Jesus of dawdling and not taking care of the situation. Weren't we friends? But then in the mix of that, we get this incredible faith statement opportunity where Jesus says, who do you say that I am?
Yeah,
What
yeah.
do you believe? Are you going to trust me even when everything says not to?
Yeah, and
so
that
much.
attitude from her makes that even more profound. Because you could spin that. See, one way to do Bible study is to write a play. How might this have turned out if it were really done right? She would be so accusatory that even when he asked her, she said, well, I used to believe in you, but I don't now.
Yeah.
You had your chance.
Are you kidding?
Are you kidding?
But thankfully she does not. And
Yeah.
that speaks volumes, I think, to the grievers who read that.
Yeah,
I think it's always interesting because when we first married Martha, where's Martha? In the kitchen. What's she doing? Complaining. Mary's listening to Jesus.
Uh-huh.
And then who's the one who has the faith statement? Where
Yeah.
along the line
Yeah,
did Martha
Yeah.
listen at the door?
yeah.
Yeah. That's the other thing that this kind of study doesn't do, is we forget about the Mary Martha, the first story, even though there's an allusion to it. Yeah. Well, what happens, think of what you are supposed to be doing, reading about the life of Jesus between Palm Sunday and Good Friday. What normally happens? Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
Triumphal entry and
Yeah. Triumphal entry, all the little kids, every little kid in Judea with a palm branch running, and mom and dad with their phones out videoing the deal, right? I mean, that's what Palm Sunday is all about, right, children? Then they had candy, and then they went out for an Easter egg hunt, and yeah. Well, that is what it's about, isn't it? And then what went on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday?
He was in the temple,
And what happened? He was probably in quiet worship and devotion.
creating chaos.
Yeah. The Jewish groups come at him almost one at a time, like they've had a meeting. Okay, you go with that question, because that'll get him going. And if that didn't work, then you come in with, and as soon as he leaves, and it's just one after another. Can we find a way? And in each one, it's kind of reflects their particular bent of theology, how God works. So they're, from the way we understand things, here's a question you can't answer, because any way you answer it, you're going to, and that goes on all week, so that it gives us a mindset of Jesus and followers that had to be exhausted. So that, when they finally get to the Passover celebration, that is at least one thing that we understand and that we know. And then, of course, Jesus forgets the Haggadah, and so he messes up the reading and makes up something about a loaf and a cup, and this is my body and my blood, and then they go out and, and then the story gets back to what we expect. So,
I think it's interesting, like, when you brought up, he was in the temple and he wouldn't hide. All right, so he wasn't ready. But then when he walks into Jerusalem on Monday, he wasn't hiding, he was turning over tables. So it's kind of like the whole contrast of the other visit when he was in the temple, that this is, he has a plan,
All that time.
you know.
and then what follows, I mean, we go almost directly from this Palm Sunday return to the upper room. It's as if there was nothing in between except a few little, it just like the whole week was encapsulated, squeezed together. And in the upper room, what should happen. We'd have the Passover meal, and then during that, he'd bring out the loaf and the cup, and that would be instituted, and then they'd go to the Garden of Gethsemane, right? No Passover in John. What they celebrate, what they have, is they have a meal on the night before Passover. Passover in John is Friday. And I think it is a deliberate move by John to take that association of being delivered from bondage in Egypt to Jesus' death. The angel of death comes, the angel will pass over. That happens, that begins, the people would have sat down to that dinner as Jesus is being buried. Because it happened at sundown, see, when you sat down. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Thursday was Passover. And the meal they celebrated in the upper room was the Passover. So it confronts you with, John, what are you doing? And we talked about this before. If you look at the sequence in which they were written, we assume Matthew, Mark, and Luke are written early, John later. Who knows? 70 to 90, I've heard as late as 135 AD, which I think is absurd. We know from Paul's writings that as early as the early 50s, Jesus died in 27 AD, that within 25 years, the church is established as far as Corinth, and to the west, and they already are doing communion wrong. They've been doing it long enough to screw it up, and that happens. Well, I know that we always do that, but it'd be so much simpler if the deacons could just carry both trays at the same time, right? I mean, how does change occur? Not theologically, but we started using children because none of the adults would walk down the aisle with palms. So what had been a recognized part of the church, to the point that Paul is now trying to straighten it out, is all but ignored by John. What might that mean? Again, the question that I've tried to have you always asking your mind, what was the concerns in the church at the time of John that were being addressed? And the reading about the washing of the feet probably tells us something. That probably the church in the time of John looked like the political scenery in the United States today. Deeply divided, very factious, and not at all reflecting the love of God. Because what does he do? He doesn't institute something for them to do. He shows them how to be his followers. Become a servant to one another. If you assume the role of one that is humble, that is, one that doesn't have to have their way, you are stripping the other people of their power over you. That's the way the community is to be. Now, have any of you ever been in a church that did fish washing? Foot washing.
I thought it was fish fry.
Yes, that was, yeah. Before the fish fry, yes. You cannot take her out in public. Well, you know, I am certain that John, this writer, felt as guided by the Holy Spirit as did Matthew, Mark, and Luke. We have some evidence that he knew enough about Mark to occasionally use Mark's order of things, of events. Why just ignore that? Why not go there? There are two answers. One, Matthew, Mark, and Luke were wrong, right? Well, a second one might be John had never heard of those three, that his group had gone off their own way. But there's nothing in this that about the foot washing where he says, this is what, do this always in remembrance. No. Nothing is institutionalized and made sacred. It's just an enacted parable. You want to know what I want from you, let me show you. Okay? If you have ever been, have any of you ever had your feet washed in the sun? Pretty humbling?
Yeah.
Oh,
Remember?
I remember.
yeah, it just,
Jim did it.
yep. It's profound, it's a profound experience. And when you put it in the context of how much they lived for him. He was the leader. He was the center. And what is he doing? He's acting like a servant. And when somebody said that, he said, at last you understand. See? Now,
I think, thinking about that John is so much like, and the way John does things. When he has the event, and then he has Jesus explain the event. And I think that with John wanted his audience to understand things, and so he is telling that story. I don't know what I'm trying to say. And somehow I think at the end, when you were saying, because he talks about a meal, well, obviously his audience would probably put that, what the meal was. But the fact, I've never heard the thing about if Jesus died on Passover. I've always seen the Passover meal, the Last Supper, as being that the old deliverance, the new deliverance, kind of new. But to see that as the death and all, that was powerful to me, And I think maybe that was John's intention. And he tells the story from what he wants his audience to understand, his conviction. And somehow at the beginning, where Luke or somebody, this is, I'm telling you so that you will. John doesn't tell us that, right? He really doesn't say, I'm writing this so that you will all understand and this is why I'm doing it.
it's at the end.
Okay, so, I don't know.
Well, yeah, John's real ending is, this was written so that you might believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, my conviction is that the evidence of what drives John's writing is all summed up in the phrase, the Jews. Whatever that really meant, which can be two things, three. Former Jews within the church who are still insisting that you have to be Jewish to be Christian, or Jewish enemies outside that were stirring up persecution, which we know from Paul's experience. All the problems Paul had was with Jewish people reacting to him and turning him into the law. That's there. Or it could be some combination of the both. But it was, the threat was more than just a problem. It evidently was deeply dividing, distracting, separating, disorienting people, that John feels compelled to write this so that, and at this point along in this study with you, it seems the heart of the problem is the Jewish reliance upon law. The known will of God as defined at Sinai and since. And remember, the law was not the 10 Commandments to the Jews. It was everything else that had been written and interpreted. But how did you know what God wants you? To do what's right, and it's in the law. Okay, and that will earn you salvation. And if that's the message, then what the Jesus of John is saying, no, it's all about your connection to the connector God has given you, which is me. I am the bridge between you and God, and there's no other way. No other way meaning not what he's saying. Put them scrolls of the laws away and rely on grace of God. Grace is not a word John is fond of. I borrow that from Paul. See? All of our religious experience always flirts with that. There's always something that gets back to behavior or rules or expectations rather than a vital living relationship. Does that make sense? It would just be nice to know, if John had written an introduction saying, this is a result of a struggle I have been facing and that the church is facing, and this is where, somebody, that got lost. It didn't, they got a new phone, and when they downloaded it, it wasn't there. And so. Okay.
And then when he says, the new commandment I give to you, the only commandment in John. And
Yes.
so the other three all have the great commandment, right?
Yeah. No,
No,
just Matthew.
just Matthew.
Are you talking about going to or
No,
love
no,
one
no,
another?
no.
Oh,
No, I'm talking
yeah.
about.
Love one another.
Love one another.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, which is, we were looking at the Ten Commandments in the parking lot, and I thought, why do Christian churches have the Ten Commandments?
Because they
Why
told
don't
us
they
we
have
couldn't.
The great commandment from Jesus.
Yeah.
You should love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul, and you should love your neighbor as yourself. That's what should be out there. I'm not Jewish. That's what Jesus told me. So,
Jesus only made 3 commandments. Who can state all 3 of them? Love your neighbor as yourself. Number 2, go into all the world and make disciples. Number 3,
Be baptized. No?
do this in remembrance of me. It is interesting, why isn't there a long list of what's right and wrong, what's acceptable and unacceptable? Because there is such a list, but it didn't get you any closer to God.
well, no, it's just, when you look at Christianity, it's really very simple. Love God and love others. And it's really hard. It's really
Yeah,
hard.
because then the next question is how? How do we do that?
Isn't that why the Jews came up with 690 laws?
Oh, sure. Somebody asked a question, yeah.
You should love God and you should do all these things. Well, then how do you do it? Well, honor the Sabbath. Well, how do you do that? Well, you don't work. Well, what is work? And then we have to define work, and then, okay, and then we forget why we're not working.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be honoring God instead of working.
We also have the Holy Spirit to guide
Right,
us
yes.
without rules and
Right.
regulations.
There you go.
And that's part of what's in this unique only to John chapters where Jesus, at the end of this meal, just talks forever. I mean, people are looking at their watches, and one of it's a long prayer, was the first of it, and I note in the study book, we have taken portions of that and used them frequently at funerals. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you I go to prepare a place for you? There is, and it's interesting because this is focused just at the 12. and it is that pre-crucifixion final instructions, and it is very reassuring as well as challenging. And then in that he puts, this one thing I ask of you, love one another as I have loved you. And somebody says, damn. Right? Who's lining up for that? Who's volunteering for that? Again, which suggests, hints at the problem that was being addressed. Were people just taking this? See, having a commandment of laws, that's an easy religion. I mean, you can figure out how to cover all that up and lie and cheat on it and still feel good. And so what else, boys and girls? One of the things I'm supposed to ask you, there's going to be cake next Sunday. So Betsy wondered if it's possible that we could have cake and then study John. I was pretty assured that you people were capable of that. But I will be on a sugar high at the time because one piece is not enough. That's just a given. So, what I'm asking is, we will have this session next. Good. Right answer. Yes, thank you. Okay. So what other questions do you have, or thoughts or observations?
Yeah. Does this story not reflect how little Christ thought of us as believers, and because he had to double down. I mean, he had to stay the 2 days. All the miracles that he had done up to now, and yet he had to stay the 2 days. I mean, I say how little he thought of us in that manner, from that standpoint, yet we are that lowly in understanding and following, yet he loves us so much as to go ahead with the plan. So how could any of us possibly reach the extent of that kind of love for people that are so backwards in their beliefs?
That's profound. And I hate to say that about him, but did you go to Purdue? No, I mean, and see, that really is what that story is about. And consider it. All this other stuff, but when you get to death, death is death. And anybody who's been there, there's a finality to it. There is nothing else like it. Okay, so he's not just dead. He's 4 days already stinking dead. That cannot happen. If he shows up the next day, well, he wasn't really dead. He was in a coma and, all that jar. No. This whole story is set up so that people go, well, in the words of the sister, please don't. It's, you've been, if you've been at the grave, when you walk away, it's not like, let's go back and check to see if he's really gone. No. I've dealt with that. That's one of the hardest things in life to do. I think exactly that. Here's a wall you can't get through. I can. Do you believe? He gets an A. That's just, yeah.
For today.
Yes, we don't want to carry. Of course, we could say it is a demonstration of what a great leader he has had through all of this, that he has risen to such height. And are you thinking something? Okay.
Why are we so scared of death? Or say we're not scared, why do we fight death so hard?
The most,
There may be several answers to that, and I don't like any of them.
So, I think when you think about it, and people, well, not counting accidental, sudden, whatever death, but the old people that we've known who've died lately, I don't think death was a problem for them.
no,
The problem is for us. We fight it. We fight holding on to that person, whatever it takes. You know, be the whole thing of trying to say, it's time to pull the plug. How hard that is, not for the person, that that's the best thing for. We can't let go.
yeah.
We don't want to ever let go. I don't worry
But why
about.
can't we let go?
Yeah,
I mean, that also goes to the same question.
right.
Are we not doing that
Yeah.
person a favor if we let go, yet we can't let go? We want to do everything in the extent of the human element to keep them with us. And
yeah.
I don't want to start answering that either, but.
See, like Betsy, I think the most peaceful people I've ever known are people who knew they were dying and have decided that's okay. And I remember the one, this lady called me over, and you just have to come. You just have to come. I'm fine. Because husband was dying of cancer, and he was at that point where no drugs could touch the pain. I mean, oh my God. And he was ready to go. He wanted me to pray, take him now. And what did she want? Don't let him die. You know, and that's that whole thing in a nutshell. And in one sense, each person was speaking out of their own need. And that's not false either. You know, it's profound. Yeah.
Have we changed somewhat? I'll say maybe in just the past few years, where we talk about having a celebration of life
Yeah.
rather than grieving.
Yeah. Part of that is the way we've done it is so painful, it almost prolongs grief rather than, well, look at how it works. We come to the church, we have a funeral, okay? We've all been to calling and walked by the open casket, and then after the service is over, in some cases, you walk by the body one more time to see what a good job the cosmetologist did, right? I mean, yeah, right? And then we go out to the cemetery and we put them in the ground and we walk away. And for most people, the community of support disappears with the cars.
Or the dinner.
Huh?
Or the dinner.
After the dinner.
Yeah, or after the dinner. I mean, you know, everything is geared towards getting them in the ground and walking away. And I just found that so frustrating, you know, working very hard in a funeral to try to get some sense of hope in the midst of loss. And then we go traipsing through town and go out to the cemetery, to the point that we in that church reversed. We had the internment and then we went to the church for the funeral. The hardest physical thing, the body, has been taken care of. Now let's talk about the person. I mean, it really changed the whole atmosphere. And then we didn't have calling. We were too civilized, or uncivilized, I don't know, whatever, to do that. But then what we would do after that funeral service is we all had punch and cookies, stood around and talked, visited. You know, because the people had come in to be there and with you, and it was a world of difference. So, but tradition, we've always done it that way before, and that's what drives. And when you ask a funeral director, well, what do people do? They'll recite the standard way and whatever they can charge you for. So, cynical. You know. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
This is a quote that's on Facebook, and they're good things on Facebook. To miss the ones we love so deeply to feel the vacuum of life so powerfully, yet to still show up for life in the pain. Says that our pain is not stronger than our love. You know, that, yeah.
Is that a new phone you have? Oh. Her battery was not doing, it wouldn't run things constantly 24 hours a day, so she needed to replace it.
It said it was weak.
So we got 2 new phones, so. But they were free. They were free, yeah, yeah.
Well, for $397, we paid next month's bill and we got 2 new phones
Yeah.
with 2 chargers. And they've also changed the chargers.
So you have to buy a new charger for a slightly extra fee.
And all the cords are worthless. There's no plug-in for your earphones.
Well, let me say something to you on behalf of your future pastor. If you ever are doing studies with her, the thing you need to bring to the lesson is your thoughts in the journey of your personal studies. Otherwise, you're not studying, you're just coming to hear what the leader says. You're very, I mean, there have been some really good stuff offered up here. That's the kind of thing that ought to be going on as you're doing it every day. You write it down, you make notes, you wonder about it, you bring it here and listen to each other. Makes a huge, it will have a profound positive effect on the experience of everybody. I mean, I know you live and die on every word that comes out of my mouth, but there is some evidence that some of you can actually say things profound too. Because what we're doing is you're opening yourself to let God speak to you as you're studying. Share that. The questions, the conclusions, the ideas, that's what the community is for. Okay, now a word of encouragement about Holy Week. The Good Friday service is very different than last year's, which I promised you was something you had never seen before, and I think we delivered that. I hate just doing the same thing again, and on the trip to wherever we went, Arizona, Sedona, where that chapel is, and sitting here looking at that 28-foot tall statue of Jesus with the glaring eyes. But I was watching all the Catholics and all their stuff and going, how could we do that? And that's where I came up with the idea of the Stations of the Cross. Here's a way to retell the story, and it's deliberately scripture, reflections, prayer, and meditation at each of those things. And you don't have to walk or get on your knees. I mean, all in your sake. So I think it's going to be very good. And if it's not, it's entirely because of the readers I chose. Some of them are.
I'd like to rethink my part in this.
Yeah, if it's great, I did it. And if it's not, it was her part.
I have really big shoulders.
Okay, so we will gather next time over cake.
Cake, I love cake. I like cake.
Oh,
I love cake.